Okay, we are heading north on Silverado Trail between Napa and St. Helena. We are on the way to the cemetery in St. Helena to visit the grave of Cecilia Ann Shepard, one of Zodiac's victims who was stabbed by him at Lake Berryessa on September 27th, 1969. Along with Brian Hartnell, of course. He survived, and she died 2 days later at Queen of the Valley Hospital in Napa and was buried in St. Helena.
Where are we?
All right, Tom, we are now at the cemetery in St. Helena where Cecilia Shepard is buried. So we're just a few minutes from her final resting place. So, shall we?
Let's go.
All right. And that's the thing about this cemetery. They've got a gate, so cars can't get in if it's locked. On the other hand, anybody can just slip around, which I often do. There's rather a lot of very big headstones here. My buddy Dan and I came here a few years ago, and I'd always known that she was buried somewhere.
Wait a minute. You have a friend besides me?
Believe it or not, Tom, yes I do. I have friends and a life outside of Zodiac.
Now I know you're lying.
Anyway, but yeah, we came out here and had a look around for her grave, and I was positive it had to have been one with one of these big standing stones. We looked and looked, couldn't find it. One day I finally broke down and went into the office, and they said, oh yeah, she's buried over here. It was in the one section that I thought, nah, she couldn't possibly be buried there. It looks too modern. Turns out, nah, it wasn't particularly modern. There's, well, people buried there from the 60s. And so it's actually, she's quite easy to find. That is, if you know where to look. There probably won't be flowers here because there rarely are, other than the time that Sandy and I brought some a couple of years ago.
Message board, Sandy?
Yes, one and the same.
It's a beautiful area.
Yes, that it is. However, I'm not sure I'd want to be buried here because my family is
I don't want to be buried anywhere.
Yeah, well, my family's from Southern California, so hopefully in another 80 or 90 years, yes, I plan to live to be at least 120, then I can get buried down there in San Fernando. In fact, that's where Richie Valens is buried, believe it or not. Okay, here we go. She's the fourth one in. And here's where Cecilia is resting.
She actually lived for a couple days after the stabbing. She didn't die right away.
Yeah, that's correct. She survived for 2 days. However, she apparently slipped into a coma as soon as she arrived at Queen of the Valley Hospital, from which she never awakened, and then she died in her coma 2 days later. There was over 1,000 people at her funeral, which was held at Pacific Union College, which is where she was transferring from to go down to Riverside to study music. One account I read said something like 1,100. I think there was another that said it was closer to 1,500 students that were there. And of course, you know, family and friends. I don't know how many people actually came here to the cemetery, though.
There were a lot of people at the funeral, and they actually had the police actually set up hidden cameras and whatnot to thinking that the Zodiac might show up and be at the funeral. And those pictures exist to this day. Unfortunately, I've never been able to see them, but that's one of my goals, is to get access to those photos and see if we recognize anybody.
Yes, that would be fantastic. The only problem is, how would they have known who the Zodiac was, since there were no composites at that time?
Well, you know, and the other thing is, have they ever gone back and looked at those? Now that all the jurisdictions know what all the other suspects look like, have they gone back to see, hey, maybe it's Arthur Lee Allen, maybe it's Bruce Davis? I don't think that's been done in years, at least decades probably.
Now, somehow that wouldn't surprise me if they haven't done it yet. On the other hand, this is basically a cold case for everyone, and there's a lot more recent cases that they have to solve. So unfortunately, I think in most jurisdictions, Zodiac is on the back burner.
Well, she's buried in a beautiful spot. This is a gorgeous area.
Yes, it is a very peaceful place, but then most cemeteries are. And as you can see, there's lots of people that come here and leave flowers. I should come back here one day and leave some more flowers again. Like I said, other than the time that Sandy and I did this about 2 years ago, I don't think anybody else has been here.
Okay, Ed, so since we're stuck in this rush hour traffic between the city of Napa and Vallejo, we're not moving as quickly as we had hoped. How about that Mr. X dude in Mike Rodelli? What's he smoking? Not Mr. X, what's Rodelli smoking?
Well, that's something I think, Tom, that everybody wants to know at this point, because as we all know, there's, really not a lot to the theory. It's based on nothing more than a couple of coincidental dates between Mr. X and Zodiac, and a couple of vague similarities in personality, and that's about it.
So essentially, as the story goes, Mike Rodelli came up with the idea that perhaps Zodiac had written letters using his own name to the newspapers, let's say 6 months, on the 6-month anniversary dates of Zodiac murders. And so Rodelli asked you, hey, can you go to the library and look for unusual letters to the Chronicle or the Examiner 6 months after or before, murders. And so you did that, and you found something unusual from the guy we call Mr. X. Is that right?
Yeah, that's pretty much how it happened. Rodelli was unaware that he could order microfilm through the library so that he could look for it himself. So he asked me to do it. I thought, yeah, sure, why not? He thought since Zodiac had apparently written 3 letters 6 months to the day after the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, and he had spoken with Mike Kelleher, the criminal profiler, who also wrote This is the Zodiac Speaking, and
an excellent book.
Yes, and also a Zodiac-based novel called Suspect Zero.
An excellent book.
Quite right. Both also available on Amazon.com.
And you can order them direct link at ZodiacKiller.com as well.
Yes, but in the meantime, he had spoken with Mike Kelleher, and Kelleher had said, no, Zodiac did not write any letters before July 31st, 1969. So Rodelli thought, gee, I wonder if, much like down in Riverside 6 months to the day after the murder of Sherry Jo Bates on October 30th, 1966, Zodiac had written 3 letters apparently in response to a story on April 30th, 1967. And he wrote one to the Riverside Police Department, one to the Press Enterprise, which is the local newspaper, and one rather cruelly to Joseph Bates.
Yeah, the victim's father, Sherry Jo Bates' father.
And so he thought maybe Mr. X, or maybe Zodiac, using his own name, had done this. So that's why I started looking in June 20th, which was the 6-month anniversary of Lake Herman Road. And I started looking from that date forward. Well, at the end of June 1969, I found a very, very odd letter written by, as it turns out, Mr. X, which when I first read his name, I thought it was actually made up. It looked kind of phony to me. And he had mentioned Hitler because there had been an editorial on May 28th of the same year in which the author, in the San Francisco Chronicle, in which the author had mentioned Adolf Hitler. Now, Mr. X, he was saying that both the editor of the Chronicle and the guy that had written this editorial missed the point entirely, and that the conditions, the social conditions, were such that it was possible that a Hitler type of person might arise here in America. That's what the letter was about. there was one line in which he mentioned young people, something like dead and dying.